Good morning, everyone. It's a sunny day, so we're all trapped inside South Bank, so I hope you all appreciate we've got the sun, and you can sit in an air-conditioned room all day. Welcome to this year's Spectrum Scale User Group in the UK. I guess there's a little bit about kind of who we are as a user group. So we're driven by a user community. We're not IBMers. I work for University of Birmingham, Claire works for OCF. You can also see Bob and Christy on there. There are sort of counterparts in the US who do this. So we're all kind of volunteers kind of doing this to, enthuse you about Spectrum Scale. And put little IBM Champions logos on there. So we were designated IBM Champions this year, which is a kind of global program that recognizes people's kind of community engagement and kind of support. So it's thanks to IBM that we got nominated through for doing that. Do you want to do it?
Yeah. So just a little bit about the user group for those of you that are new today. We are a community that meet once or twice a year, but we also run a mailing list where you can ask technical questions and get involved in discussion. Please sign up to this if you've not already. The link to it is on the Spectrum Scale user group, which is spectrumscaleug.org. We've got over 750 members listed on there. So it's a great community and a great forum for asking questions. This time last year, we had one of the biggest user groups that we've ever had up in Manchester, with 86 attendees from 41 different organisations. And it was a great couple of days. Seems like 2 minutes since that happened. But this year, we're pleased to say that this is now the biggest event that we've ever run. And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for all of you. So we're massively grateful to all of you for giving up your time and providing your knowledge and your insights and sharing that in the community. So this year, obviously, we've got 2 days. We hope to see you all there for both days, if possible. There's 111 registrations, which we're really excited about, and plenty of new members as well. So we've got people from the likes of Sky, Citigroup, as well as universities such as Queen Mary, University of London, and Imperial College. So please network with your peers. This is an ideal opportunity for you to speak with them. And we do try and encourage questions throughout the 2 days that we're here.
And we can do it alone. So Claire and I do a lot of organising this. We'd also like to thank Ulf, who's sitting over there, who's our IBM liaison, who goes off, we give him a list of topics and he goes and scratches his head and finds some speakers for us and encourages them to come along and do their presentations just slightly before they turn up on stage. So that hopefully there won't be too much kind of changing the presentations people have kind of submitted this morning ones. One of our morning speakers is not actually here at the moment, so we might shuffle in. Oh, he's just arrived, actually.
Right, thank you.
So Rob will be doing his speaking slide at the right time. And we'd also like to thank all of our sponsors as well. So we've got an evening networking and social event tonight, which you're all invited to come along and bring your name badge, so they'll let you in. There's a map in the program that shows you where it is. So we do thank them all for contributing and supporting the user group. And particularly this year, we've got some new sponsors who have not engaged with us before, which we're really appreciative of. And if you want to know where it is, we're at the wharf, which is about 200 yards that way. So then Google Maps seems to show you walk along the bank, up and then back down again. It actually overlooks the Thames, so I think you have to walk around the kind of gated fence bit to get in there. That's from 7 o'clock tonight.
Yes.
If you've not already done so, for tomorrow morning's breakout sessions, please sign up on the sheet. It's out of the reception desk. You can do that at break or lunch. So in the morning, this room will be broken into 3, and the 2 rooms at the back are quite small, so we just need to know which is the most popular to put in this one, and then how many we have to kind of squeeze into the other spaces. And we'll put a list up tomorrow morning to show you which breakout sessions in which room. So we do have a busy agenda for today. So if we cut speakers at the end of their time, that's just so that we can make sure everyone gets time to speak in their slots. We don't want the last person of the day kind of, getting no time because we've overrun. There's plenty of breaks, lunchtime, ask questions then if you don't get time during the sessions as well. But first of all, we'll hand over to Ted from IBM. I think he's ready. He looked a bit shocked then when I mentioned his name. I'll take and introduce himself. The other thing, we are live streaming at the moment, so please do ask questions. You can access the streams online. We've got links on the SpectrumScale.ug.org website.
Okay, thank you. Is this working? Okay, can you hear me? So on behalf of the IBM team, I wanted to first thank everybody for coming. It's nice to see a large group here. I've had an opportunity to either participate or speak at a variety of different user group events, and our SpectrumScale user group groups are actually one of the most interesting ones, because you guys are doing a lot of really interesting things with our product, right? I know you guys typically come looking for information, looking for sharing ideas, looking for giving us requirements, and looking to tell us where we're getting things wrong. And so that's what I'm hoping to encourage everyone here to not only speak to myself, but other members of the IBM team in helping us improve SpectrumScale. But before I get into any other remarks, I wanted to thank Simon and Claire. I know from various user groups I've done in the past, there's a lot of activity. It's a thankless job organizing some of these things. So thank you for organizing. And it's also good to see, the number of people, number of partners, number of clients that are here speaking. I counted on the agenda today. It looked like we had 6 users speaking today over the next 2 days, and 5 partners. So I was very happy to see that. My background, I actually am a development manager within the SpectrumScale development organization. I'm actually responsible for our cloud initiative, our big data and analytics team, our object team, and our client adoption team. It's kind of a shared responsibility across SpectrumScale. I'm not Doris, for those of you that met Doris. If anybody has seen Doris in these meetings, Doris took a new role within IBM as a director on our IBM Cloud organization a few months ago. And just recently, her replacement as our product development director, Amy Hurst, was announced. She wasn't able to come this week and asked me to give the opening remarks on her behalf, but she will is expected to be at the Boston User Group next month. So one of the things with her coming into the new role is we spent a lot of time talking to her about, what our organization does, and we gave her some history of SpectrumScale. And it was very interesting to see over the more than 25-year plus history of SpectrumScale. And I've been in part of the HPC and Scale organization long enough to remember the day that they actually formed the File Systems Group, created the GPFS product. I was at a different part of my career. But one of the things that was very interesting looking at the history is not only as it started out as a multimedia file system, but its strength was in its HPC roots, but it's diversified over the last few years. And talking to Amy about the value of scale, what our clients see as the value of scale, and why they're passionate users of SpectrumScale, was interesting to see the different types of clients that we have now: financial services firms, HPC clients, automotive clients, much more diverse than what we've had in the past, doing a variety of different things, leveraging some of the things that we've just recently rolled out over the last few years in terms of multi-protocol support, HDFS transparency support, object, and now we're getting lots of interest in what we're doing with cloud and what we're doing with AI type workloads. So I expect there are a lot more to come in terms of scale, and I expect a lot more growth out of it, but it's really was interesting to see that history. So I won't take too much time here. I know Simon and Alf asked me to give some opening remarks here and kind of welcoming everybody to the meeting, but I think the real reason that you're here is not to see me, is actually to sit down and listen to the subject matter experts to talk about scale, how they're using it, things that you can learn, things that you can share, and kind of network within this community here. So again, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for coming. It's nice to come someplace where it's nice, warm, and sunny, which I was surprised. We're still getting snow in New York. Spring hasn't arrived, and but as it looks out here, we picked a good week to have this meeting. So thank you again.
Thanks, Ted. I don't mind the first set of slides.
We are ahead of time.
We are slightly ahead of time, so you can talk a little bit more if you want to and have more questions. I'll hand over to Matthias. Thanks.
All right.
Your mic on.
Does it? Do you hear me? Yes. Okay. Hello. So I'm Matthias Dietz. I'm the RAS architect in the Spectrum Scale team. So I'm working in the development team in IBM Research Development in Germany, in Kelsterbach. For the last 3 releases, including 5.0, I was the release lead architect. And today I'm going to show you what new features and functions we have implemented in Spectrum Scale 5.0, which has been released end of last year. So before we start, I would like to make a round call here and really ask people a few questions to get an impression of how Spectrum Scale is used. So let's first start with which versions of Spectrum Scale are you using? So please raise your hands if you are using 5.0 already. All right, around 10, great. And how many are on 4.2.3? Okay, good. What about older than 4.2.3? Maybe 4.2.2 or 4.2.1? Okay, and even older than 4.2? Oh, please upgrade.
You guys stop the GSX?
Okay, I see. All right. Another question, who is using protocols? Also a few of them. Okay, out of the ones who use protocols, who's using NFS? Okay, SMB? And object? Oh, just one? Oh, two using object. I see, all right. And final question, who is using the GUI? Okay, and the REST API? One, okay. All right. Yeah, I think that's good. And at the last user group, I asked this question in Germany. There were a few more who were running still on old versions. And we encourage people really to upgrade because otherwise you can still run on old problems and you don't get the benefits of the new versions, obviously. All right, let's talk a bit about 5.0. So in 5.0, we had I've started with the highlights here. So we had a strong focus on scaling and performance enhancements. As you know, we are working on this Coral installation, right, with the Department of Energy and Oak Ridge Lab and Livermore Lab. And based on this Coral efforts, a lot of performance improvements went in. Things like improved space efficiency and performance for small files. I will have some details on that later. Improved performance over RDMA. Better performance, metadata performance in regards to directory locking and CPU jitter. And our GSKit library, which we use for encryption, but also for authentication between the nodes when doing RPCs, that improved a lot. Especially if you're running Spectrum Scale on C, then the performance improvements have been significant in the area of GSK. So from a currency perspective, we added support for Ubuntu 16.04.3, especially also for protocols. So protocols did not support Ubuntu before at all. And this is the first release where protocols support Ubuntu. We support Red Hat 7.4/12 SP3. And one important thing is we dropped the support for Red Hat 6/11 and Ubuntu 14.04, as well as Debian, because we have to update our tool chain and have to reduce the test metrics. And we believe that now Red Hat 7 and /12 are in the field already for years, and it's time to go forward. Is there a question?
Time for questions. About Red Hat 6, are you not getting like a full of request to support 5 for this? Because I know that people want to, I mean, my side had some support issue where we want to keep Red 6 for some reasons. We see vendors coming, adding support for.
Yeah, so your question is if we got requests for Red Hat 6 support, right? And
do you want me to take that?
maybe Carl can answer that, please.
Thank you. So those who don't know me, Carl's actually the offering manager for Spectrum Scale. So the short answer to your question is, yeah, we have had requests for it. We've also had a lot of requests for Red Hat 7.4 and 7.5 support, and we can only do one of those two. So, you know, we have finite resources. How many people in this room would rather have 6.9 than 7.4? So I understand your dilemma. I feel your pain, but I have to make a business decision here. Which one of these two do I ask my test people to test? So the decision that we've made is that with the 5.x release stream, we're going to drop the old operating systems, focus on the new, and keep moving those forward, and support 7.4, 7.5, the corresponding Debian, Ubuntu, you know, all the others as fast as we can. And then for those of you that are not in a position to be able to upgrade from the older Red Hat 6, SLES 11, etc., the intent, and I have to emphasize the lawyers require that I say intent. My desire, if it were entirely up to me, and as many of you know from previous meetings, not everything that I desire actually comes about. Our intent is to maintain 4.2.3 in support for at least as long as Red Hat 6 and SLES 11 are in support. Does that make sense as a plan? So, yeah, once those go off support, Scale will also go off support. You know, it's kind of impossible for us to support it beyond the support life of the operating system, because, you know, potentially we hit a bug that's an operating system bug, we can't fix it, we can't support it. So that's kind of the plan, which I think for Red Hat 6 is around 2019, late 2019, 2020, somewhere around there. Yeah. Any other questions specifically about this release stuff? Otherwise, I'm going to give the
maybe I come to the next point and you stay here. The new license model. So if there are questions to the new license models, then he's the right guy.
So, all right. So, the licensing. So data management's actually been out for a while now. We introduced that kind of around about 4.2.2 or 4.2.3. which is licensing by terabyte. And then on ESS, we also have licensing per disk, which in most cases will work out cheaper than per terabyte because we like selling ESS. And those, how many people were in Manchester when I talked about licensing? So some of you may remember at the time that I said I hated the fact that we called one of the licenses per disk on ESS standard edition because it created a lot of confusion. Well, with 5.0, I get to fix that. So when ESS moves up to 5.0, which is, I think it was this week actually, wasn't it Tuesday? Yeah. I think it actually GA'd yesterday, the new software stack for ESS based on Scale 5.0. Instead of having standard edition per disk and data management edition per disk, we now have data access edition per disk, data management edition per disk, which is what I wanted all along. And if you hear socket edition, if you hear standard edition moving forward, that is always going to mean sockets. Okay, standard edition, Scale of software, sockets, and data access, data management on ESS per disk. So small victory, but I'll take what I can get.
All right, thanks, Guy.
So Cole has got a session later on today. You've got more questions.
Exactly. Okay, so let me continue here. So another major feature we've added in 5.0 is file audit logging. And here I will also talk about some details in the next slides. So let's start with really one of the most significant features, which is improved space efficiency and performance for small files. And this is by providing more than 32 subblocks per block. So in earlier versions, when you defined your file system with a particular block size, and 32 subblocks have been created for the block size. If you take a 4 megabyte block size, the subblock size was 128 kilobyte, right? And depending on your average file size, that could cause some overhead in I/O, because if your file size is just 8 kilobyte large, your average, then you have some overhead by having 128 subblock size, kilobyte subblock size. Now with 5.0, we have really more flexibility here and can create more than 32 subblocks. And in case of 4 megabyte, for example, you see here in the table, it would have a subblock size of 8 kilobyte, right? Because in the end, it creates 512 subblocks and end up with 8 kilobyte blocks. And now this improves the performance because you have the benefits or the advantages of both the large block size, but also the small subblock size for small file IOs. Right? One downside of this new feature is it requires that your cluster is fully upgraded to 5.0. So all your nodes need to be 5.0 and your cluster level needs to be 5.0. And it only works for newly created file systems. You don't provide a way right now to migrate or update an existing file system to the new model. Another enhancement is about RDMA. Here we did several RDMA performance improvements. One is about verbs RDMA send and receive scaling. That's now scaling to thousands of nodes. We reworked the code path to remove mutexes and make it more efficient, and also improve the caching, so improve the caching efficiency. And also more focus has been put on the NUMA awareness of the RDMA code, so that if you run on NUMA architecture, which is quite commonly run, you will see some benefits as well. File audit logging, I already mentioned that, is a very new feature in 5.0, and it helps you to log file system operations to a secure log file, right? And which you can use for auditing purposes. And this logging or auditing happens on file system level. So it's not that this is implemented as a part of the protocol stack or Samba or NFS or so. It's really part of the Spectrum Scale file system and happens very low level. And there are multiple events which can be captured and written to the log. Things like open, close, destroy, rename, unlink, ACL changes. All of that is logged into the audit log. For doing that in a scalable manner, we introduced a new component, a so-called Kafka message queue. Kafka is an open source product, Apache Kafka. And we introduced that now as part of file audit logging in our product so that we can leverage that, and each node in the cluster will generate the file logging audit events, push them into this message queue, which is highly scalable. And then there are dedicated nodes in the cluster, or selected nodes in the cluster, I should say, who are picking the events out of the message queue and writing them in a local audit log in JSON format, so that it can be used by any auditing tool or external auditing servers to plug into your security infrastructure. And tomorrow at 10 a.m. there is a talk which you can join if you want to hear details about file audit logging. I guess I need to speed up a bit, but yeah. File system updates. So 5.0 had a lot of smaller but important improvements. And in the area of the core file system, we worked on one feature, concurrent modification of preferred NSD servers. So before 5.0, you had to unmount a file system when you want to change the primary or secondary NSD server. And that's no longer needed, so you can really concurrently modify that. Another improvement is about the file system check. So when running a file system check, before it was sometimes hard to find out what it's doing. You didn't see progress. Sometimes people thought it's stuck and they had to cancel it, or they called support because they just didn't know what it's doing. And now we have a new status report feature so that you can see that file system check is still ongoing and still working on a particular area of the file system. So this helps a lot, I think. We also added a command to get the status of a running trace so that you can see easily if the trace is running or not. For encryption and compression, especially for compression, here a very important feature came in. We now support LC4. That's a new compression algorithm. Before we did a on-the-fly CLIP compression, which had a good compression performance, but it was kind of slow for reading data, right? And now with this new LC4 compression, the read access to compressed data is much faster. I think around up to 5 times faster than the CLIP. And that really makes compression available for other use cases. So before we only recommended compression for data which you write once and maybe read never, or read once. But now with LC4 you can even read more often, and its read performance is much better. So another improvement is LROC for encrypted files. You might know the feature LROC. It's local read-only cache where you can use disk space, local disk space to expand your page pool as a cache. So LROC couldn't be used for encrypted files, but now we have at least an option saying you can enable that. LROC is even used when encryption is used. However, the data which is written into LROC is still unencrypted. So if you really want to do that, the recommendation is that you use local disk encryption, like Linux disk encryption, LUKS or so, and then put your LROC data on that encrypted disk. Another improvement is about the encryption configuration. A new command, mmkeyserve, helps you with configuring spectrum scale with the SKLM setup. From a performance perspective, we improved the file system rebalancing. So that's now more efficient and therefore faster. So before we had some strict round robin, how we rebalanced blocks if you do restripe of your file system. And now it's a lenient mode, which means we only move blocks which we really think are necessary. The result is nearly as good as with a strict round robin. It's not as strict ordered as it was before, but from a performance perspective, the result should be exactly the same. But we move less blocks, and therefore the whole rebalancing part is much faster. And the old version, the strict round robin, is still available as an option. InfiniBand addresses can now be specified in the configuration for RDMA transfers, instead of specifying IB ports, you can specify addresses. And we extended NetVerify, our tool to check the network, with additional features. So one feature is that it now supports GPFS subnets. So you can specify with a parameter that you only verify one subnet or another. It also has a new feature to verify MTU size. So if you want to increase your MTU size and you want to test before if all nodes can cope with that, you can use NetVerify with that new option. Protocol support. In 5.0, we worked on currency for protocols. For SMBs, that means we upgraded to new Samba version 4.6. And we had a few problems in the field where customers did not, or did mistakenly upgrade some of their Samba nodes and others not. And for those who use protocols, and Samba in particular, might know that we currently have the limitation that all Samba nodes in the cluster must run with the same version. If you have one node in the cluster running a different version, then this can take down your whole the Samba cluster, right? Therefore, you should never do that. Now, we had cases that during upgrade, because of some upgrade failures or some manual steps, some nodes run an old version and others new, and customers silently went into problems. And now we really detect that condition and prevent Samba from coming up on the old nodes if node versions mismatch. And we also warn clearly about that in MM-Health and the GUI and so on. Another feature where many people were waiting for is support for the Unix primary group. So when you use Samba in combination with Active Directory, then Active Directory can, has two fields to specify the primary group of a user. It has a traditional Windows primary group, and which is used obviously by the Windows servers and clients. And this Windows primary group has been used by Spectrum Scale as well. But there have been many requests that instead of using the Windows primary group, we ought to look at the Unix primary group, which is an additional field explicitly for Unix interoperability between Windows and Unix. And now we really provide this option so that you can choose which primary group is the one you want to be used. NFS upgrade to Galicia 2.5. And as part of this upgrade, we have one very, very important feature, which is modifying NFS exports without impacting connected clients, so-called dynamic exports. People who use NFS before might know when you did some NFS changes prior to 5.0, then each update to an export triggered a grace period and informed the clients that they have to reclaim their logs, right? And within this 90-second grace period, your I/O was basically waiting or stuck, right? So every export change really had some impact on the connected clients, and that's now solved by having these dynamic exports. For object, I see here's a mistake on the slide. The upgrade to the Pike release did not happen in 5.0. That's now in the next release. So I have to remove that. Object is still on Mitaka, on the Mitaka release. But we worked on an improved upgrade for object, especially when you come from older versions like 4.2.2 or 4.2.1. Now you can upgrade to 5.0 in one step. So before there, we asked customers to do the intermediate steps like 4.2.1 to 4.2.2 to 4.2.3 before they could upgrade. But now it's really possible in one step. And in general, I already mentioned that we support now Ubuntu for protocols. The install toolkit, the install toolkit is our way to make installations and upgrades much easier by automating steps and having a defined interface. We also had a lot of improvements to the install toolkit. Before I go ahead, maybe I ask a question, who in this room did already use the install toolkit for install or upgrade? All right, not much. Yeah, so I can really recommend to use that toolkit because it makes installation as well as upgrade much easier. Especially if you are using protocols, then upgrades can be very complex and error prone. So by using this toolkit, it will really automate the steps and you know, make it less error prone and help you to get the cluster upgraded more quickly. All right, so and here we did several improvements in 5.0 to even make the experience even better, right? One is about ESS. So now you can use the install toolkit in the ESS environment to, for example, upgrade protocol nodes. That did not work before because it didn't know that it was part of an ESS system. The install toolkit now does also some pre-checking of network connectivity before before it even starts to set up the cluster. That had led to several problems in the past where the network was not configured correctly, and then installation started, and you know, it just didn't work because of network issues. And new features have been added to the install toolkit. It now supports file audit logging, since we added that in 5.0, and it also supports call home setup and configuration. And finally, it also has been ported to Ubuntu 16. So for the next slides, I will probably go a bit quicker about that through them. For most of them, we have a detailed talk either today or tomorrow. Yeah, but I will highlight the most important points. And so starting with monitoring and RAS improvements. So we constantly try to improve our monitoring to detect more failure cases, more conditions, and avoid problems which we do not warn about early, right? One condition where many customers run into, unfortunately, is a filled local disk. And if the local disk is full, especially var MMFS, where we store our configuration and store other informations, if that is full, that can really lead to all kinds of problems. And in combination with protocols, that can even lead to some corruption, right? So in 5.0, we added monitoring of the free disk space of var MMFS, and if it's going low, then
is this an MM health or is a GUI function? Or?
That's a MM health function, and it will end up in the GUI as an event as well. Another condition is an unresponsive GPFS daemon. So we had cases in the past where the GPFS daemon is stuck and does nothing. It doesn't even respond to status requests or anything. And now we have a dedicated condition for that and warn customers if that happens. We introduced new monitoring for the file audit logging and the Kafka component underneath. And for some customers, it might be very interesting to hear details about this event script callout, because now you have the possibility to put in a script on the system, which is, I mean, a custom script, which is called every time a new event happens, MM Health event. And if you do that, you can use that for different use cases. One use case would be if you want to forward the events to an ELK stack, right? You want to push that to Elasticsearch or to whatever. Just provide a script which is called for each event and then push it there. Or you can really grab for particular events and do some actions based on that, right?
Different from the standard callback?
It's different from the standard callback, yeah. In this case, it's just a call-out script you would need to provide. So it needs to have, a particular name, and it needs to be in a specific path, and then it would be called. And it's on you to fill that. And it's not using MMAdd callback or MMLS callback infrastructure.
So this runs in a separate thread and isn't blocking the rest of the GPFS?
So One requirement is that it runs fast. So it's not a separate thread. It's part of the monitoring thread. It will never block GPFS IO or something like that.
So when you say
But-
fast, it's a maximum time of execution.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Yeah. So we have a timeout in that. And obviously, it's not efficient if you put in a script which runs 3 minutes and it gets killed after 30 seconds, and that for every event. So that wouldn't make sense. So if you really want to do heavyweight stuff, you should think about some asynchronous offloading to something, to a dedicated thread. On the bottom, we have, I described some improvements to call home. Especially the setup has been improved and made easier because you can now do it through the install toolkit, as I mentioned before, as well as the GUI has pages or panels to configure call home. One nice feature is you can now use the GUI or call home, based on call home, to upload your GPFS snaps to IBM if you have a support ticket open, right? So instead of downloading a snap to your workstation or laptop and then uploading that through the IBM web interface, you can directly on the box with the GUI or with the CLI upload the snap from the box through your call home setup to IBM. All right, GUI REST API. Here, one improvement focus area was about AFM. So when you're using AFM, then the GUI has now the capability to access remote AFM clusters and also have a view on the home cluster with multiple, with the events from the multiple cache clusters. So, and more details will be shown tomorrow in the GUI talk at 9, I think. Same for TCT, transparent cloud tiering support. That has been added to the GUI. Many improvements to the health, performance, and monitoring part. Things like performance and capacity thresholds can now be managed through the GUI. Network monitoring has been added to the GUI. So it's really improving a lot and helps a lot to manage the system. The REST API finally has been expanded with additional things as well, like performance data collection. You can now query your performance data through REST or trigger a snap through the REST call. And as I said, tomorrow at 10 will be a REST API talk. So let me skip the next slide. So AFM. Tomorrow there is a deep dive at 10. So the slides will be available to you for reading offline. AFM, multiple updates have been made. Transparent cloud tiering, there is a talk right after that, so I'm not going into the details here. And same for big data and analytics, there is a talk tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. about Hortonworks and machine learning. So now, quickly, disclaimer, I have one remaining slide about 5.01 Outlook. That's nearly finished from a development perspective, and it should be released soon. So some improvements, again, are planned from a file system perspective. So we will support end-to-end, or our intention is to support end-to-end data checksums, even in a non-ESS environment. We worked on the integration with systemd so that all our individual processes and daemons are started through systemd and managed through systemd. There have been improvements to FSCK, and now there have been improvements when you want to add disks to an existing file system, so if it's full. So when the file system was full before, it wasn't even possible to add disks, which is obviously not very good, right? But now with 5.01, that's possible again, so you don't need to remove data before you can add disks. Health monitoring, we focused on simplifying the performance monitoring and configuration, And there have been several improvements in the area of CES, network monitoring, and call home. And tomorrow in the system health session, I'm also going through some of the details. NFS enhancements are around recovery and debugging. NFS Ganesha will now be automatically restarted if it crashes for some reason, and we also generate some back traces if it crashes. And from the GUI perspective, the most important changes are a new service panel to manage services like NFS, SMB, CMON, performance monitoring, and others, and to display performance data from remote clusters. And that was just an excerpt of 501. There are many more features on the list which we are working on. So
OpenStack Pike is...
OpenStack Pike is also on the list, yes. All right, that's my part. If there are questions.
All right. That's a nice teaser for 501.
When 501 will go out?
Yes.
What is the official statement, Carl? Soon.
Put it this way, is it in code freeze?
Yeah?
Yeah, it is. It's in final test now. It is.
So we're going to renumber it 6 before it comes out, like we did last time.
Yeah, no. I'll tell you a funny story about that if you buy me a beer, or several beers. I hate to be evasive on this release date question, but there's an official IBM policy, which is that we never say, some people break this and they get in legal trouble. We should never say a date until the date is actually here. So we can say intentions, we can say this month, next quarter, next half, next year. But I get into big trouble if I say a specific date before we actually get to that specific date. Right? So our intention is this month, but it depends entirely on the final testing that we're in right now, because I'm sure nobody wants us to release a product and fail final testing.
Carl, I think it's fair to say you get 2 releases a year.
Yes.
In general, we've managed to get 2 releases a year in the last few years.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to stick to. My reason here is that my experience with customers generally is that most of you are willing to wait 18 months for somebody else's fix, but you're only willing to wait 6 months for your own fix. Or not even 6 months for your own fix.
That's why I'm asking. I've got support tickets open.
Yeah. So, we release twice a year. We don't necessarily expect you to upgrade twice a year. And now that we've done 5.0, which was a really, big chunk of functionality, a lot of, as Tess explained, a lot of big improvements right in core itself. The next few releases you should expect to be fairly minor mod releases, mostly focusing on system health, better monitoring, better management, better transparency, rather than dramatic new amounts of functionality. But we are going to try and stick to 2 a year because, as I say, nobody wants to wait more than 6 months for their for their new functionality, and many of you want to wait less.
Thank you. Other questions?
Oh, can I mention one more thing that's in 501 that was not on the slides? How many of you have received an NPS survey from IBM? That's that one that says, would you recommend this product to friend or family? Anybody had one of those yet? Okay, you've probably seen them from a lot of other products, right? It's like every time you use a website these days, when you go to navigate away, you get a little pop-up that says, would you recommend this? So in 501, those of you that use the GUI for admin are going to start seeing this survey pop up, and it will ask you on a scale from 0 to 10 whether you would recommend the product. Yeah, sorry, this is IBM policy. It's going to be in every product. If you dismiss it, you will not see another one for 3 months. There's a timer built into the GUI, so you can just click it, dismiss it. If you have issues, if you rate anything less than a 9, I get an email about it. I get personal communication about it if you answer this survey with anything less than a 9. and IBM is tracking the scores. So
8 is okay.
yeah, I know. Don't get me started on the scientific validity of the NPS scoring scheme. All I can tell you is that in the NPS scoring scheme, a 9 or a 10 means I don't get an email about it, and anything less than a 9, I do get an email about it. You get a chance to put verbatim comments in there, by the way, regardless of what you score. I go through the responses once a week. I read every single comment. So if there's anything you want to say about the product, good or bad, you can put in those verbatim comments. And even if you give us a 9 or a 10, I will still read the comments. And I will, if it's a question or something that needs a response, I will respond to the comments. Okay? Assuming that you don't all go crazy and I get 4,000 a week. Up to now, the way you've been getting these is if you buy the product, then about 3 or 4 weeks later, you would get an email. Or if you filed a PMR and your number came up in the lucky lottery, you would get an email. But from now on, if you're using the GUI, and like I say, no more than once every 3 months, you'll be prompted to ask whether you want to respond. So that's new in 501.
So please help Carl to not get too many emails.
If our score gets below a certain amount, I get emails from my boss's boss's boss. So that's exciting.
We could read that for you if you like.
Yeah. Just give me lots of 9s and 10s, and I don't have to deal with it.
Right.
How much work has been done in removing the pesky debug service? I've been tripping over every time I go to a new release because I can't. Before there aren't many PTF levels before the next release.
Yep.
And then the lower PTF levels, there's 2B debug services that haven't been passed. How much work has been done to try and get rid of those horrible things?
So we did some changes to the debug cert structure, but I think we need to talk offline what exactly you mean. I don't.
The certs that occur which are not really required for a debug cert at a lower PTF level, they've always been. But now, because we're going to new releases all the time, we always get to PTF 3, for example, and then another release comes. So those debug certs are still there and they're causing instability.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk offline and. Right.
Very much. Thanks for giving me a reason to install the GUI so I can control you with the 4 rating. One question is that I don't know how many of you guys with show of hands are using systemd to basically manage and monitor and orchestrate all of your long-running system processes.
That's a good number.
Great. So how many of you realize that GPFS has been installing this system service unit on your system already? Because basically all of you are running a version that does that. Do you realize that? Yeah. Do you guys use the IBM provided system service, or did you create your own unit service? Huh? You use the provided one? Yeah, I actually we created our own, and shockingly we called it GPFS.service. Guess what? We usurped the one that IBM installed, and so when I was doing the beta for 5.0, I couldn't figure out why it wasn't starting up, and I figured out that startup was actually calling my system service unit, not that. So just a word of warning on that, and okay. Hope it is time to good things to come. But I still, whenever I do a system CTL stop on the GPFS service unit, it gets into a failed state and says I should have used it in shutdown. That seems like the wrong approach.
Yeah.
Regarding systemd, we had to introduce basically to add we have to add to the unit the functionality to wait for it and then to be out because.
Okay. You added that as a dependency.
Yeah, we had to create an additional service to wait for the event stack to be up.
I see.
And then on the GPFS, you can add the unit, you can add an additional.
Yeah, exactly.
Better integration with systemd is one of the things that we are looking at. As the show of hands here indicates, it is important to people. It's part of the, all the kicking and screaming is over. That's where Linux is going. Whether you're like me and you only understand it, or whether you're young and modern and you understand systemd. That's where the world is going. So we are trying to integrate better with that. So with the permission of the user group, one of the things that we will be doing in the near future is asking on the user group mailing list for people to volunteer to talk to us about how you use System D and what more you need from Scale to better integrate with System D, what specific things you're doing beyond the very basic stuff that we're doing already. And also remind me when I get home to have a word with development, because it should be called scale.service, not GPFS.service.
Yep. So just one last question over there.
I saw in the file auditing that they're using the lightweight events on top of Kafka. So is this, can we also use lightweight events instead of policy runs, policy scans, or not? This is something we were wondering for having some lightweight way of migrating.
Yes and no. So the no part is the lightweight event interface that audit logging is written to and other things that we're working on, including live antivirus and metadata integration, things like that, is written on top of this LWE interface. We came to the conclusion that that interface is too low level to let end users access it. There were too many ways to break file audit logging by accidentally doing something not quite right. So we didn't want to do that. So what we're planning to do is to build an abstraction above that that's more bulletproof, which we've been calling Watch Folder. You think of it, those of you that are familiar with iNotify, you can think of it as essentially iNotify for Scale. And we are hoping to have the first version of that in the 5.02 release. And as usual, no guarantee, who knows what will happen between now and then. So that will be your supportable way to get access to that lightweight events layer.
Will that API be documented?
Yes, it will be a
document. Might be going through include files trying to look at the LWE.
Yes, it will actually be documented and supported. Okay. There's no lot to it in terms of documentation. It's basically just a callback that you use in your code to register for which events and which queues you want to hear from.
If I find the include files better than documentation in some cases.
Yeah. But, you know, as a program, isn't that the way it should be? as we say in the Linux world, if you can't understand the code, you don't deserve to.
Will that be available for evaluation?
Oh yeah, it'll be if we stay on plan for it to be in 5.02, then it will be in the 5.02 beta, which is probably starting sometime in the summer. So yeah, look out for that. So anybody that wants to be in the 5.02 beta, you know where to find me. But again, I have to emphasize that's a hard thing to do. I can't guarantee it's going to make this release, but because we're doing 2 releases a year now, if it misses this release, it'll only be another 6 months till the next release. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthias. He's our next speaker. He's going to give us an ESS technical update.
Hopefully everyone can you hear me okay? Excellent. So I got 2 topics. We got the Elastic Storage update and support. And I'm going to try to do it in 12 minutes. We'll see. So essentially, Elastic Storage Server 5.3 framework, right, which contains Spectrum Scale, got released or GA'd last week, and there was an update that came out. It essentially has Spectrum Scale 5.0 inside it, which all the great stuff you just heard about. There's a new entry model on the Elastic Storage Server, a GL1S, which is basically one 5U84 drawer that you actually can start with. So you can start smaller on the Elastic Storage Server configuration as well. And then there's some enhancements we did on the installation features with Upgrade. You heard a little bit already about, playing nicer with the install toolkit. That's actually a good thing, right? I mean, to sort of do that and not step on each other. And I was proud that I got Carl's right terminology on this one, the Data Access Edition. And this is a good thing. I mean, for the Elastic Storage Server, we did have confusion. It was like standard and it was data management. And, I even confused some people with you put standard, that means you got to buy more sockets and you got to buy enough stuff. And you don't. I mean, so essentially it's nice and clear now. The Elastic Storage Server has 2 additions, data access, data management. You get all you can eat clients, all you can eat extra servers for protocol services, set up utility nodes for quorum nodes, for manager nodes, do the right thing. And the Elastic Storage Server, and I thanks to Carl for renaming the license, it's a lot easier now to sort of see that. Yes. Well, yeah, I was going to let Carl in the Ask Carl session, let him touch. This is more just an ESS. So the entry model, again, it's a GL1S. You have an EMS, you have 2 IO servers, and you have an 84 slot enclosure. So it's a starting, capacity. Usable is probably about 250 terabytes, depending on the smaller drive size. But it's an interesting new model, and again, you can start smaller now with an elastic storage server. You don't have to have the 4 or the 2 to start with. So we kind of grew up right in the models. We have our SSD based elastic storage server models, the 1, 2, and 4. We're going to do a 6, but I don't think there's enough need for it yet. And then on the capacity line, the nearline SAS, right? We got 1, 2, 4, 6. Lots of interesting things that will happen, later this year, from the elastic storage server, in terms of, maybe a hybrid kind of mode, maybe doing upgrades from drawers from 1 to 2s to 4s to 6s. But stay tuned. But this is kind of what's on the truck today, right? Sort of giving you the update of what's coming out and what's there. I also wanted to kind of give you guys, a little more in depth. It was like, what actually are the components, right? You say ESS 5.3 and what's actually in there. So here's the components. It's, Spectrum Scale 500, the ESS 5301 just was what you got GA'd. If you have the traditional version of the elastic storage server, the HMC is still being updated for various firmware that manages on the traditional, and then you have XCAT for doing the deployment. You have your system firmware on the actual servers, and then Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It is at 7.3. We'll probably roll the 7.4 in the next, maybe ESS 5.4 probably was what we're kind of targeting. You do have a special kernel, systemd, and enterprise, and a network manager as well. The good news is it's a lot easier for us internal to IBM to get access to that software now. So when we're deploying the elastic storage server in your environments, you don't have to wait for clients to go register their subscription and go try to find this particular versions that we have. So IBM should be able to get that to you a lot easier and not have to worry about, hunting those down. The Mellanox distribution was updated to, even though it's not the 4.2 series, it still is some patches that we've been adding into the elastic storage server. And then again, the firmware that you have for your IO nodes and whatnot. The other question we sort of get asked a lot is, when do I need to upgrade the elastic storage server version, right? From what to what? And I think this is at least finally trying to get this out into the open, is when I'm at a particular version, right? I can, go from, clients that are running 5.0 today, they can go to 5.2, right? So they can sort of do a 2-hop kind of jump. So if I want to go to 5.3 and I'm running 5.0, I'm going to 5.2 and then to 5.3. It kind of gives you the ability now. You can sort of imagine, and if I'm at 5.2 right now and 5.3 just came out, but I don't really want to go to it yet, I can wait till 5.3.1, right? And then basically make the hop. So kind of giving you that decision point of when you want to do. You do want to sort of have maintenance on your elastic storage servers. Don't let them lapse. We've had clients running the 4 series, so trying to get them up to the latest version, there's lots of hopping we have to do, and it does work from a rolling upgrade, but we always find new and interesting things when we're doing rolling upgrades with the environments. Yes, Lawrence.
Just a quick comment on that. Are you saying that you're able to do a direct jump?
Direct jump, that's the intention, yeah. So if you're at the 5.1 series, you should be able to do a direct jump to 5.3. Yes, but again, the whole purpose is to get this matrix out to the group, right? I mean, so there's no confusion. The other thing was to get this matrix out, right? I mean, here's the ESS version. Here's the particular kernel versions that we're using. Here is the operating system environment. The OFED distribution, the firmware is, systemd. So you now have a matrix. Again, these slides are going to be on the user group list, so you can actually see the matrix of versions that we have for elastic storage server. Don't be like the person behind the curtain. We're showing you as much as we can. A quick side note on performance for ESS, because I've worked on a lot of urgent use cases or urgent, attentions. So, working with Indolus, as well, we're having a new sizing tool that we're bringing online. Our benchmark center in Poughkeepsie, they procured 2 Elastic Storage servers last year, a GL6S and a GS4S. So we're rerunning benchmarks on that whole environment. They upgraded to ESS 5.3, and we're rerunning, file system formats and coming up with a test plan to do projections. And really the good news in talking with research, right, is to make sure when Sven comes up here and gives you numbers on what he's gotten with his IOR, well, can we do that somewhere else? And the good news is on the GL6S at the Poughkeepsie, I can do those numbers somewhere else. So that's the good news. So we're sort of trying to do that data and have that updated and be able to project.
Are you going to give a talk on this at some point? Because this would be interesting.
This is actually, stay tuned, probably do a talk on this, maybe for supercomputing. So this sizing tool right now that we've done is internally, it's to IBM and to business partners. But actually, the intention that we actually want is to have clients be able to access it as well. So there's a talk, stay tuned on that. Right now, we're talking with internal IBM management, but it's really a sizing tool for file and object. So other kind of IBM products are in there as well. So
just thinking about if we're deciding on a future system, this is
exactly.
what we need to do.
Yeah, the intention for all of you who are smart at understanding all the various products, you can sort of plow through the right kinds of questions. You can see where we're going, and get to the point with the IBM person that you're working with to procure. Another thing, only because people always like, well, I don't know what the hell my ESS is doing. And I run this with clients now. It's like, DStat is like this old classic Linux utility tool. Please use it. Run it with GPFS ops, run it with GPFS. You can really tell who's the top CPU, memory, who's doing the stuff. And again, in these critical situations that I've been brought into, that's like the first thing I sort of run and find out what the ESS is doing, right? I mean, is it doing the right kind of IO even before NSD perf? I was like, let's just see what's going on in your system. From a deployment strategy, so there is like I said, a better install and upgrade. We've talked a little bit about the matrix of going 2 versions to the next version. Really, the showiness, right, is we have basically the ability to get your system installed. There's a plug and play mode that you sort of come up and running. The system already comes. You don't have to reinstall from scratch. You use a utility called GSS Utils. Essentially, we used to have this mode called hybrid mode. Fusion mode is what it's actually turned into now as well. But it's pretty cool now because it's ncurses based. It prevents you from doing fat fingering on a lot of these crazy commands that you have to type and that we had in the quick deployment guide. So again, you can sort of do that. The SSR, the lab services folks, persons, they can just go through to do that and sort of validate the system. And we're actually going to run through this in the manufacturing plant in Guadalajara this next month that I'll be there. We're going to have the various persons down there. We're going to run through the procedure. And like I said, we're going to make sure that this works as well so that you're not dealing with anything from IBM. There's a FAQ. There's people you can talk to. Support, like I said, I got the 2 minutes now to talk about support. So support is to follow the Sun model. We've had the US and China team that has been online. We're bringing a new team here in Germany online as well, and trying to sort of make sure we're covering the follow the Sun type of support. My feedback to you is you're filing a PMR, and you can't get access to it or you had no update, contact the support delivery managers before going to someone like Andrew or, tell your IBM, team, contacted the support delivery managers. They have the power to escalate to the right level, whether it's a SEV 2, SEV 3, SEV 1, before going and logging a crit sit, right? So, the crit sits are great to really get everyone's focus and attention on there. But the support delivery managers that we have, their job is to make sure that if anyone's slacking, they get in gear and kind of give you an update, right? So again, talk to these people first, then Andrew, then hit your crit sit kind of model. And hey, I think I did it.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
So just whilst Rob's getting ready, I'll pass me if the developers, IBM guys who are here, if you could all stand up. just so that people know who you are.
Yeah, we've got let's see.
So if you at lunch, particularly at lunch and the breaks and things, if you want to ask the IBM guys a question, yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself? I'll bring the mic over and start over here.
Hi, everybody. Just, see, do we have an HDMI plug here? Should we, should I transfer it?
Yeah, I've got you.
James from inside, responsible for scale right here. Andreas Böhlinger, GUI and REST API development.
Thank you, Chief. Business development and particularly support the OEMs.
I'm Leon from China. I work for Spectrum Systems, including Allworks and also Bitcoin.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm Clara and I own the technical and sales enablement for Spectrum Scale and Object Store.
And you have had the opportunity this morning. Thanks. So you go and ask these guys a question. They want to hear, your feedback. There's an AFM guy in the back there, I'm sure. I spoke to him last night. He was very interested to hear everyone's feedback on AFM.
That's it.
So the next talk, so Rob Basham, he came up two years ago.
It's been just a year, and I had a great time last year, and actually had a key breakthrough while speaking at this conference last time. And so I always like coming to London, and looking forward to my presentation. Thanks for having me. We've been very busy. We've actually delivered quite a bit since last year. Last year about this time we were talking about worm support, and maybe just a quick review on what transparent cloud tiering is. Tiering is the ability to tier data natively to object storage. So, we can set up a policy, ILM policies, to migrate data to the cloud, and then transparently, as data is accessed and can be pulled. It's typically used for cooler data. Obviously you don't want to have data that you're, modifying and, it's really hot going out there deleting because, object storage, that's just not how it works. Doesn't work really well for that sort of traffic. But if you have storage that is cooler, there is definitely interest in, and we have several customers now that are using this for their cooler data. We also released the ability to share data with the cloud. So sharing is the ability to, if you have data that originates in the cloud, you can import that data into Scale through this feature. Of course, you can go either direction. So if you want to share data with native object storage applications, you can write ILM policies again and just export the data based on the policy. So these were things that were around last year and what I've talked about. So this is a quick review. We've added worm support. We've added pre-migration where you can have the data in both places. And those were things that we've had around for a while. Let me talk about what's in 5.0. So with 5.0, we really didn't work on performance much. And just kind of give you a rule of thumb for performance. You can think about this as something where you can move a petabyte or two a week, right? So if you need to do more than that, you're probably stretching this function in object storage for that matter. Object storage isn't big at necessarily moving a lot of data, but so about a petabyte or two a week. But we did do some things to scale this. So, what I would say is with what we've done here, where we've added in support for files, multiple file systems, file sets. And with container spillover, we're up to around comfortably, in the low tens of billions of files. So if you want to transfer low tens of billions of files, we're there. And if you're interested in doing more like 100 billion, come talk to me afterwards. Let's talk. And in addition to that, we've added in remotely mounted client support, which of course with ESS is very important because that's a very common way to use ESS is through remotely mounted clients. So, with this, we've really, added in this scalability. We also added in multiple tiers in the cloud. So we had some customers that wanted to do a cool tier and a cold tier. And so they said, well, wait a minute, I want to do my cool tier on-prem, but when I get off-prem, I want that data for cold tier. We added in that support in 5.0. So these are all things we were talking about with an Outlook last year, and we've delivered those now. And so you can get a topology, on here with these multiple node classes talking, where you might have one node class talking externally to your external object storage, and one internally. This, for example, you see the purple and red node classes here. And then you see a remotely mounted node class. This might be a more complicated cluster. Let me tell you about just typically what our customers say. They say, Rob, your migrations are fine. If you can do a petabyte or two a week, you're fine. I'm good with that. But when we talk about recall, they say, I'm not sure what my recall needs are even going to be. I have umpteen hundred users, and I'm not sure when they recall data, day or night. And so you may get recall storms. And so, if you do the math on, 1 or 2 petabytes a week, that's a low gigabytes a second. And they say, well, I'm not sure, if that's going to work. So one of the things, and this came out of this conference, there was actually a gal that did a presentation on how she had put her networking enablement on every single cluster. I said, we could do that for TCT. And we did. It's not in 5.0 or even in 5.0.1, but the feature's done and functionally tested. It's in systems test now. We call it direct client access. So what you can do is for recall from every node in your cluster, you can now directly do your transparent recalls. So what this means is you have a 1,000 node cluster, you have 1,000 nodes that can directly access your object storage. What's really cool here is I have a customer right now who has set up their IBM Cloud Object Storage with an accessor node on every single node in the cluster. So if you're familiar with Cloud Object Storage, this is a new feature there. So that basically now they have accessor nodes on every node in their object storage, and they have the ability from the client to request that data. Now that this whole bottleneck of recalls, we're just exploding it, right? So now it's completely scalable, and it scales with the size of your cluster. What this means is, I used to show in big bold letters, do not use this to back up your data, right? The reason being is you have a bottleneck on your recall. Well, with this, if you're willing to set up a flat sort of network and you have a big enough object storage cluster with a lot of access or power, you can use TCT for restoring your data. This is something, this is now going to be possible. And like I said, we're done with the functional test on it. Hasn't been systems tested yet, and the outlook would be for later this year. This is something we're working on. Let me talk about 5.0.1. I just had to bring that up because the idea came right here in this meeting. So, the other things we're doing that we're doing right away in 5.0.1 is we've added in service restoration using SOBAR. So SOBAR is a feature that's been around in Spectrum Scale forever, and it's a nice little snapshot restore feature. We can with it, we can do, it's on the order of 1 million files a minute restore. So it's fast. So, you know, if you have a problem on your cluster where you like a complete site kind of disaster, you can now restore your service in about a day per billion files. And and we will add that. We have also, we've added in an automated maintenance scheduling. So there is some maintenance with TCT, things like backing up your cloud database, things like reconciling your cloud data with your file system data. We've added all that so it's automated in background. You don't have to schedule your cron jobs anymore. We do that for you. And we set maintenance windows, background maintenance windows. You can change those, you know, 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. and on Saturdays are the standard maintenance windows, but you can move them whenever. We've also added in, you know, some improved, you know, metrics and some other things to you know, to help with service and support. Yeah, Simon.
Can I ask a quick about Sobar? So by default, is it like 2 meg files that get to the cloud? How does that work with Sobar? Do you tier everything out anyway?
So here's the deal. Object storage just does not do really well with small files, and but we support it. And so what Sobar does, what we do with Sobar is, you know, it is about backing up the inodes. And when you back up the inodes, you know, it all gets tarred into a big, huge file. So by the time it hits object storage, it's a huge multi-gigabyte file is what the Sobar file that the object storage sees. But, you know, actually, if you look at what we do, we store our metadata in very small files in the cloud. And it works just fine. It's just, again, it's a performance issue. If your mix of files is really small, you're not going to get great performance. Again, it's an IOPS rate challenge for object storage. Good question, thanks. But you know, we have people. This is just coming out, and we have people looking forward to this. I would say, you know, if you have a single site and you have any worries about, you know, the DR or whatever for your data, you know, I would definitely recommend picking up Sobar when it comes out in 5.0.1. Okay, probably the hardest thing we did, and you know, I would say in many ways the most exciting was, again, we're working on recall. And what we've done is we've already had parallel threading for recalls, but what we've done is we've expanded it so that parallel threading is within an individual large file. So it used to be if you had like you know, a multi-gigabyte file, we're pulling it in on a single thread and it's taking, you know, at object storage speeds again. So if you understand how object storage works, it works very well in huge, massive parallel threads. But if you go on a per thread basis, it's slow. And it's just, that's just object storage the way it is. So by multi-threading large individual files on the part boundaries, for those of you who understand object storage, that's how it works on parts, then we've, you know, it's on the order of a magnitude faster. Your latency is going to be better. So look for that coming up. Okay, so we've kind of talked about functions and features, and now I'm kind of want to turn it over to you. I want to talk to you about something we are working on for the future, and I wanted input on. So it's Kafka based. We're taking Kafka and we're going to use Kafka to support multi-cluster, multi-site. So if you understand object storage, one of its strengths is multi-site. It does site distributed erasure coding. So, you know, the more sites, the more efficient it gets in terms of storage efficiency. And also, you know, you get, you know, some interesting redundancy and resiliency characteristics. So, you know, using this Kafka message bus, which Scale already has, we've heard some talk about that from Matthias earlier. We're taking that message bus and we are using it to communicate with remote sites. And in doing so, we are able to, in near real time, have a consistent message space and share that data across all your clusters. And you'd say, well, Rob, how is this different than AFM? It's not. It's a different animal than AFM. This is much more loosely coupled. This is something that you could envision doing between companies, for example. Like, let's say you had a university, right? And you were a company and you're sharing data. You could have your data's off in some cloud service like, SoftLayer or Amazon. Your data's there. And the only thing you're kind of exchanging is Kafka events between the sites. It's a more loosely decoupled service. We also envision in the future that we could use the architecture such that if we use the object storage events, that would be 100% efficient. There would be no need ever for the two clusters to talk to each other. What this means is, in theory, is you could have heterogeneous file system types. Like you could envision that sharing data between Spectrum NAS, which is a new IBM product, right, and Spectrum Scale, where they would be sharing data. So it's much more loosely decoupled than AFM. AFM is scale to scale, right? I mean, this works scale to scale too, and we're starting with scale to scale, but we're working on a much more decoupled architecture to allow for heterogeneous sharing and more loosely decoupled, like company to company type sharing in that respect. So that's kind of the nature of the beast. So let's start with some of the, maybe some of the things, and I'm trying to get a feel for here if we got this dialed in right for our first release. So from a sharing paradigm perspective, what you can share is you can share like a file set with another site and set up the file set along with an ILM policy. So you don't have to share everything in the file set, but you choose what by ILM policy you want to share with the other site. So you could filter, so to speak. You could share everything, of course, right? Or you could share less than that. You filter by ILM policy to say, this is the stuff I want to share. So you have one site that's the writer, and then you could have n other sites that would be the reader. So think of this as like a single writer, multi-reader service in general. Now, multi-cluster writes, is it possible? Yes, but I'm not recommending it to start with here. You'd need application level coordination. There's no locking here. Let's just be clear, there's no locking, okay? In terms of consistency, it's going to come down to your network speed and reliability because it is event-based. But I did want to bring up this one thing that we've done. This is a compromise to get this release out, and that is directory consistency is implicit, and we're going to be building that other directory based on the path names of the parent directory ACLs. So essentially, you're not going to have your ACLs exactly matched, and you're not going to have some explicit directory work. And again, that was a compromise. I would imagine over time, we will get better at that. What this means is, if you have directories that are moving around, this initial service might not be for you. This would be more for static directories, right, and that sort of thing. And of course, in terms of ACLs, if you want to go in after the fact or during this process and modify the ACLs on the reader sites, you can do that. But in general, you can think of this as more, for static directory type operations initially. In terms of security, we didn't compromise there. Everything is encrypted. All artifacts are encrypted, or can be. Obviously, if you want to, you can turn those things off, but they can be encrypted. The other thing was, and this was the hardest thing we had to do, this is almost as hard as everything else, was dynamically adding readers and writers after the fact. If you have hundreds of millions of files, right, and you want to add a new reader in, you can't rely on the events. So we had to find a way to do something kind of like SOBAR, where you have to, catch up to these hundreds of millions of files. It has to be fast. We're working on that, and it's a very difficult problem. We thought of that, though, from a minimum viable product as something we would need, which is probably why you're not getting it in 5.0.1, is we felt like we needed to do that. We're actually quite a ways along on this, by the way, guys. And then in terms of intercluster, cluster down, failure tolerance, you can have your cluster down or your network down for a few days. If you go beyond that, then you hit the event horizon, and you're going to be having to use something more like a DR. We are going to support DR, with failover and whatnot. The other thing is again, this is a very loosely coupled thing. The management paradigm is your view is by cluster. So there's no centralized source like, something that's the master of all of these. Again, think of this in a multi-company environment. You're not going to be able to do that, right? So each cluster can do what is necessary and sufficient from itself. And it knows what it's writing and it knows what it's reading. And by doing so, you can, fit into this multi-site monitoring environment. Okay, so with that, I've kind of talked about some of our assumptions. Do you guys have any questions or comments on this service? Yes.
Rob, I'm assuming that all of this is also built on the fact that you can't then have stub files left behind or choose any type of small files to be left behind with the original files. So you're going to have to migrate everything by TC2.
If anything you want to share, you would need to migrate. So in other words, as a sharing service, you can decide whether or not you want to do it. But if you do want to share it, yes, it would need to be migrated.
So is there any sort of architectural design points for small file support or nothing yet?
There is nothing yet that we've done architecturally that helps with it, other than I would say the following. By doing the direct client access where every node in the cluster now does recalls, you can really go down that curve and still get actually pretty decent performance as long as your files are cool enough where you're not, churning the files. So the bottom line is that while architecturally we haven't done anything different, I think what you'll find is you go to direct client access, you can actually go down the curve from a megabyte down to smaller. I'm not saying you wanted to be doing, if your average size is 20 kbytes, this is for you, but you can start to cheat down that curve. We don't really have numbers yet for direct client access, but I think you can think of going down quite a ways.
So if your clients are going to be able to pull the data back directly, are you still putting a copy of that file back into the file system?
You don't have to, only on demand. So the thing is, it's a shared namespace. So you have stubs on all the sites. And then you have copies of the files where you want them. You can either by policy pull in just the stub or pull in the stub and the data on the reader sites, or you can wait for it on demand.
Yeah, well, can I ask a bit more on what Ray asked? In the simple case of a single GPRS cluster with a single object store, if the clients read a file that's been exported,
yeah,
does that inherently put the files back in the file system and repopulate the disks in the MSD servers?
Yeah, it does. In other words, it's just completely transparent.
Can you switch that off? So if you know that the client, because I had a request for that last week, because of a multi-petabyte system, that's what we want to do. The clients want to be able to read the objects, but not repopulate the blocks in the file system.
So what, I don't quite understand. How do you read the file but not populate the files in the file system? I guess there's a, I'm
happy for it to go in the L1 from the client notes, not go back to the file system.
Okay, that's a new request. So, and the thing is with direct client access, we could do that. Ooh, see, this is why I go to these meetings. See, we have direct client access. So the point is we're already having this thing where we're bypassing everything. And so that should be pretty easy to do with direct client access. Let me write that. I'll write that down, and I'm going to talk to my guys, get back to you and see, what we could do. But the thing is, I'm telling you, I know how to do that.
Multimedia, that's big multimedia files. They knew that the client was the only person who wanted the file, and they knew they didn't want to refill the files.
Absolutely, and so with direct client access, we should absolutely be able to do that. But yeah, we'll look at it.
Okay, that's interesting because I mean, as a scientific institution point of view, I have clients talking about geographically shared data and object store. But they talk a lot about big volumes. And for us, big volume means normally tapes. Is tape something that could fit somewhere in this future?
That gets asked from time to time. So if you think about it, we're an archive service. And so as a tier, we kind of fit, above things like Flash, but kind of below things, above things like tape, but below Flash, kind of a middle tier. So people say, well, gee, Rob, you work well with these top tiers. What happens if now my data is really cold, really, really cold, and I want to send it to tape? Or what happens if I have data on tape and I just want to get it off of tape and now I want to move it to object storage? Those are questions I get. Right now, we don't coexist nicely with Spectrum Archive. And the reason being that Spectrum Archive and TCT use a lot of the same stuff with LWE-DM API. We kind of get in the way of each other. So it's something we're definitely looking at and is coming up towards the top of the list. So in other words, if you look past multi-site support, when you get past that into next year, I would say that's one of the top things we need to work on next after this year. So the answer is right now, okay, so what can you do? What we can do, since they do need to be in separate file systems, is if you have a one-time move, what I would recommend is you pull it in and then you do a policy move over to another file system, and then it's in the one versus the other. And so it's, you kind of bridge them by an island policy. And I've actually seen a demo of that. I don't actually have a customer doing that. We did demo and did some proof of concepts around it. So I've seen it work. And if you think about how slow tape is and how slow object storage is, using in the middle, having that island policy, it's not going to be a big deal. It's not like it's going to tax your file system to do that policy move. The only question is, you really need to have your tape and your TCT absolutely needs to be in the same namespace. No, we can't do that yet.
I think, sorry, we're at time. So if you've got another question, Rob's around at lunchtime for you. At lunchtime as well, thanks. Thank you, Rob. So our next talk's from one of our sponsors from EH Storage. Stuart, introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, good. Thanks. I'm Stuart Campbell with EH Storage, and let me get started here. So EH Storage was founded a number of years ago with a few ideas, and one of the original ideas was we now have a new technology with NVMe storage that's available. RoCE and InfiniBand, or DMA in general, is becoming ubiquitous. And how do we get that performance out of it? How do we make it available to all of the clients? How do we really extract all of that performance? So one of our goals was to really get all the performance from this new technology, from NVMe SSDs, but also to do it not in a proprietary way. We don't want to create ASICs. We don't want to create FPGAs to do it. We want to be able to get the performance such that we can scale, we can go across platforms, we can really run anywhere in this. We also looked at disaggregating the storage, NVMe storage, from the servers, so we can scale in either direction. You can add more storage, add more compute. It also makes the scaling of the compute a little bit easier. You don't have to populate with NVMe or with any other type of SSD. We also believed, coming from the background that a lot of our founders came from, that we still want the enterprise type features that a lot of you are used to. So we want centralized management, we want full high availability and manageability. So briefly, from NVMe, so we came to this, a lot of the founders, people came from Fibre Channel, from SAS, and from different backgrounds. And myself, starting a number of years ago, before Fibre Channel in the storage industry, Fibre Channel was one of the first, was a real revolutionary type of product. Everything changed. The interface changed. Protocol, although it was still SCSI, there was quite a lot of changes in it. And that was an opportunity, I think, in the first few years of Fibre Channel. Everyone saw it goes from maybe locally attached storage with the JBOD and then started to expand out. And then it grew into the SANs that we all have today. And we saw with NVMe, the same opportunity was there. This was a paradigm shift. We're moving away from a hard drive interface to something that we can really get the best performance out of it. So NVMe as a protocol, in a number of ways, allows us to get that performance. One is it's designed for SSDs with multiple queues such that you can get the performance out of all the NAND dies that are on board. Everything isn't going through a single queue. It also helps us a lot from a performance perspective because it cuts out a lot of the SCSI stack. It's a lot more efficient. And as we do in user space, you've a lot more performance from that in general. So moving from NVMe, so NVMe by itself gives you a lot. And local NVMe storage is great. It gives you fantastic performance, but it doesn't allow you to share it. And it brings you back to the problems that were there very, very early on, say with SAS and with Fibre Channel, that you have a lot of investment in storage. You put in it in all of your nodes and you can't scale it and manage it. So NVMe over Fabrics allows you to leverage that. NVMe in general was originally designed for PCI Express, but it grew into other fabrics. So today, supporting RDMA fabrics like RoCE, InfiniBand, iWarp, and other non-RDMA fabrics. The key for us is that it maintains the protocol end-to-end. We can still sustain multiple queues. We can leverage everything that NVMe gives us, but now make it shareable, add data protection, and still do all of that with the very, very low latency and high performance you expect. So from an E8 perspective, we came at this from a lot of other storage companies. A lot of our founders were with the idea that we need to somehow get the controller away from being the bottleneck, because no matter what type of CPUs you put in a centralized controller, if it's involved in doing RAID calculations and every I/O, you're still not going to get the performance out of NVMe. You can put NVMe drives in it, you can get some of the software efficiencies, but sooner or later you will hit the same bottlenecks. You'll hit the CPU bottlenecks, you'll hit memory bottlenecks, and also you get pushed on power and cooling, what you can fit in a high density solution. So we took a lot of the features that are typically done in your RAID controller type systems and moved them out. We distributed that across all of the clients. So in a system, say with 100 clients, they're all operating a small piece each. There's a small software agent that we run on them. They see localized block storage, but everything is managed centrally. You still have your data protection up to RAID 6. And you have your full protection. You have your shareability, which is another key piece of this. If you have local storage, you can't share it. Here you have shared volumes you can use for GPFS. And we're leveraging now some of the networks that are already out there. Again, a few years ago, RDMA networks were not so common. Now, of course, with InfiniBand and with RoCE, it's becoming more and more common. So we leverage that. We've actually announced this week, I think today, full support for InfiniBand. We already have that in proof of concepts in a few places, but we're definitely have full support for that now. Okay. So from an E8 perspective, we came at this knowing, or maybe not knowing all of the issues, but knowing when we started, we were going to have a lot of work to do to make the system, the overall solution that you would very, very reliable. Although we're using off-the-shelf appliances, because of new technology, because they're trying to do things such as hot plug PCI Express, which is something that's only really become common in the last few years, we knew we would have a lot of work to do. So we put a lot of effort into working with the vendors to make sure that whatever we do in the system, we have a reliable system. So we have a few models for deployment. We have an off-the-shelf appliance. We have our own appliance, an E8 appliance. We also work with a number of other vendors. So in a software solution, for example, we work on off-the-shelf hardware like Lenovo, for example. But it's not just you take the software, take the hardware, make it work. We put a lot of effort into doing this, into making sure everything comes together and it's fully reliable and manageable. From a server perspective, of course, what you expect and are used to from enterprise storage, redundant components, all of that. But we go a little bit further. We do a huge amount of qualification work, everything from PCI signal integrity. We do constant monitoring of that. So all the way through the software stack and hardware stack, we're looking at the system, we're ensuring that it's going to be reliable. From a software perspective, the E8 agent that runs on all of the clients individually, they're completely independent. The majority of our deployments, there isn't local storage besides boot drives in the clients. It keeps them, it reduces the cost of them, it makes them a lot simpler to manage. And yes?
What is doing the RAID 6 with data protection?
So yeah, we have full RAID 6 data protection.
What is doing that?
Oh, what is doing that? That's offloaded to the clients. So the clients are doing what they need to do themselves. The management of it is done centrally. So it's still shared RAID 6 storage over NVMe or over the RDMA network, but it's managed and independently done by the clients as they read and write. And we do that because to try and do RAID 6 inside a box like this at the performance that NVMe drives can give you just puts a bottleneck there. You're paying for NVMe drives, you're paying for the performance and capability, but you can't get it out if you're trying to do all of that locally. The host agents we have, we do not distribute the storage to the clients, so the clients can be very, very lightweight. So from a management perspective, if any of them fails, you don't lose anything. Anything can be replayed back and managed on the storage system itself. So when we come to spectrum scale, there's a number of options we have for deployment. You can use a complete standalone pool. We have some customers looking at that. We also have other options where we can accelerate parts of the system, just as an LROC, as a write cache, or moving some bits of metadata, for example, onto them. So we have a lot of choices, and some of it's going to depend on, is it an existing system you're adding it to, or is it something that it's a complete new system that you're creating? So the simplest and best performing case is all clients connected directly to the storage. So either over InfiniBand or Rocky, you can connect directly. We have a number of deployments doing something similar to this already today. The limits is probably about 100 to 128 clients. Reason for this is we give every client their own unique queue to the NVMe SSD. So again, when we talked about NVMe, one of the big advantages is it has multiple queues, and each of those queues can have multiple commands. Yes?
You mentioned one of the cases is metadata and also RAID 6. Is the RAID stripe viable, fixed? What's the RAID stripe example?
Sorry, could you repeat the last bit?
You mentioned one of the use cases as metadata, and you're also using RAID 6. So my question is there a fixed RAID stripe on those on that RAID 6 that you're using? Is viable or?
It's mostly fixed at time of deployment. Yeah, it can be made quite small. Again, depending on the actual configuration from a hardware perspective, how many SSDs you have, but it is fixed at time of deployment. Yeah. Yeah. So some of the use cases we talked about it's variable. In this direct attach configuration, you have the lowest latency. Every client can access the storage directly. Although we do realize some configurations may not do this. You may not have RDMA directly to every client, although in the HPC world, there are a lot of InfiniBand connections directly to the clients. But if that's not available, we can take a different model, which is through an NSD. Some clients can be connected directly, some can go through an NSD. Again, from the E8 storage perspective, it just appears as a block device, as a managed block device. So any place you can run block storage, you can run this. It's deployable and configurable. As I said, you can share storage. You can have them as standalone pieces as well. Okay.
Those clients don't have the E8 agents don't need those clients that have the MSD don't need the E8 agents, surely.
You're right. Yes. Thanks. Yeah. So it's only, of course, everything that's connected directly that needs that. Yeah. I need to change my slides. All right. So from a performance perspective, I love the benchmarking that we have done on this is showing, and this goes back to removing the bottlenecks that you would typically have in a system, in a centralized storage system. We see direct scalability. As we add nodes, performance keeps scaling. The performance limits in the system will ultimately be the SSD itself or the network. Typically, the network in our configurations that we've shipped. And that's mostly not even network itself, it's PCI Express, NIC bandwidth. But as we add more of them, the performance goes up. So as we get the Skylake servers, as we go forward with faster and faster PCI Gen 4, our performance is architected such that it will keep growing here. The hardware, at the currently shipping hardware is the limit. As we get faster and faster there, we can keep going faster. As we go to 200 gig InfiniBand or Rocky, we can easily scale to that performance as well. Okay. And finally, I just have one slide that's really showing some recent performance wins we had. This is a combination. This is showing a good use case of Spectrum Scale 5.0 plus E8. And again, it's showing in this particular test a lot of very, very high number of builds, very, very low latency. So NVMe in general gives you extremely low latency. We had a very, very small amount bringing it over the fabric, but add all the RAID, add the centralized management on top of that. And that's the last slide I have. Short and sweet, I hope. But is there any more questions on that at the moment? So we do have a number of proof of concepts systems here available in the UK, both InfiniBand and EDR. So if anyone's interested in taking one of them and looking at that, if you can talk to me at lunchtime, or my colleague Gerdip down there, who won't make stand up. So, okay, please.
Stuart, hi, Paul Sanchez, D. Shaw.
Oh, Paul, hi.
I you a very brief customer testimonial.
Okay, great.
We've been using this stuff. We started playing around with it about a year ago. You've got multiple systems now, looking at buying some more. We found that you can connect as few as 4 100 gig connected NSD servers to one of these appliances and pull 40 gigabytes a second all day long out of these things.
Great.
So the read performance is outstanding. Above 128K block size, the read and write performance is really just spectacular. So yeah, I'm not sure about the metadata use case because we have some other metadata solutions as a flash data tier.
Right.
I think it's just a beast.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul.
Any more questions or anything?
Just one question.
Yeah.
So given that you can put this into a GPFS storage pool that's shared between SD clients, and there, GPFS supports concurrent access to data on those volumes, but the clients themselves are actually dealing with the RAID 6 calculations. How does that all work out for currency and make sure?
Yeah. So the clients see a block device. They just see a standard block device at the file system level. So they don't necessarily worry so much about what's below that. So we just present a simple block device at the client, and then they can treat that as a typical shared volume. So the client software doesn't have to do anything beyond the E8 software that we take care of. Your client software doesn't have to do anything extra.
Okay, well, thank you,
Okay,
sir.
thank you, everyone.
I believe it's lunchtime. Perfect. But if you're speaking in the afternoon session, please can you just hang back, give me your slides so that we can load them onto the laptop ready. Otherwise, lunch is served outside. I think it's out there. We start back at 1. Yeah.